and welcome to Cyber Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, that's namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hello, Rory Duncan. How are you, sir?
Hello, Christina Richmond. How are you, ma'am? I think we're okay. We're hanging in there. We won't bore everybody with the long discussion we had at the beginning. However, we're doomed, but also we feel quite positive about the future at the same time.
Yes, we'll just start with we're doomed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, we've gone back and forth about AI, haven't we? That we're doomed and then we're saved. So, there'll be some talk about that on the show. But before we tell you what's on the show, just a shout out to new subscribers. Thank you so much for signing up for our newsletter. It is a weekly newsletter. And if you have not signed up yet, you can go to richmondadvisorygroup.com. The homepage down at the bottom, there is a subscription box. And, we have all kinds of stuff that we talk about in this weekly newsletter. We point you to our blogs. We point you to our travel. We talk about our podcast. So, join us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Christina, and thanks everybody again who signed up. So what's on the show this week? Well, Christina, I think the first one is a big uh-oh. Google has detected the first AI-generated zero-day exploit. Yeah, it was this particular zero-day was designed to bypass two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And it was developed by a prominent cybercrime group.
Yeah,
so
it's
we
only
should
a
be
matter of
talking about
time.
that.
Yeah, we'll talk about
exactly.
that. And then we have, the mythos moment continues, right? Yeah. Tell us about that, Rory.
Well, there's a company called Sweet Security. I didn't know them. Maybe you had heard of them before, but...
Sweet as in sugar or sweet as in an apartment?
Sweet as in sugar. They're offering a potential solution to some of the expected challenges. They say they can simultaneously provide automated continuous agentic red teaming built on an automatic and detailed knowledge of each client's own infrastructure. So that sounds as if they're getting deep down into individual infrastructures as a way to do it. So we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, I do have one more thing to add with Mythos when we get to it. I'll say it when we get to the news section, but they have gone ahead and started looking at people's vulnerability landscape without necessarily asking permission.
Oh, really?
Interestingly.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Another
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And then we have
a lovely guest, don't we?
We do. This week's guest is Shiv Agarwal, who's the co-founder and CEO at Singulr AI. So we shall be chatting with him about AI governance. So hot topic at the moment.
Hot topic everywhere, and the use of AI in cyber and what could go wrong with AI.
I know. Nothing, of course, it's fun. Well, let's talk about
into the news. Yeah, let's talk about Google. Start us off.
Yeah, that's right. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Google has detected the first AI-generated zero-day exploit, and this is covered in a number of different places. I saw quite an interesting summary of it in Security Week, and on Monday of this week, they published a report. They collected data through Gemini and the Google Threat Intelligence Group, so GTIG, as well as Mandiant, obviously part of Google now. So they're not saying who this prominent hacker group is, and they're not saying what the targeted tool was. I imagine there's for good reasons. You'll probably have a good idea why they wouldn't do that. But the idea was that the zero-day exploit was designed to bypass two-factor authentication, so 2FA, on an open-source web-based system admin tool, and it was implemented in a Python script. Interesting that neither the hacker group or the targeted tool were named, Christina. I suppose some of it would be...
protective of both?
Maybe.
I mean, maybe because the attacker group is under investigation and the construct of the attack, why give, insight into how it was constructed for the future attackers, right? We don't want to help them.
Or there's a number of these ongoing, and if they were to be identified, then perhaps they would stop doing it, or they would not be caught, or it would alert them to the fact that they're being looked at. I thought what was interesting as well was the fact that Google says that we do not believe Gemini was used. So I italicized that. So it's not Gemini, but Google says that the actor likely leveraged an AI model to support the discovery and weaponization of this vulnerability. So not Gemini, none of their models. Fine, okay. So somebody else, but again, they're not naming who it potentially was. I mean, as it is, we have so many models out there, so many frontier models, as we're used to calling them now, that it could have been, it could have been anything that was used. And again, it would depend on where the hacker group was based. It might give a clue as to the origin. So
yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised, right?
No.
That this happened. I mean, we've been expecting this, and good on Google on their GTIG, their threat intelligence, for finding this. And I don't know what else to say. Not hooray. I was going to say hooray, they found it, but no. I mean, it's just kind of like dun dun dun. Anyway, here we are. Yeah.
So the other story this week was about, following up from a lot of the things we've talked about on the Mythos moment. People have, talked about that ad infinitum now. It's become one of the most high profile kind of shocks to the system that has got governments talking. It's got service providers and vendors running around with their hair on fire. But again, the point being the Mythos moment can be defined as, this is from Security Week, the moment when industry fully realized that human security has no chance of matching the speed and volume of AI-assisted cyber attacks. So that's not a new thing, but was kind of, again, to be expected. And we've talked about this before, right, where you bring in AI agents to enable defenders to match the attacker's speed. So it's this, fighting fire with fire, right? Let the agents duke it out, the speed of the defense to match the speed of the attack, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You have to have machine to machine, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Although it was interesting, the perspective that Security Week said that, so if you've got thousands of these vulnerabilities being found, the hostile agents are, sending these attacks in, the defensive agents are trying to counter them. There's thousands, right? So, but only some might be relevant for any one environment. And as Security Week points out, even fewer will be exploitable within that configuration. So it tends to be perhaps more specific to an environment or a client or an infrastructure. It's not sort of generic. So we talked about this before, where we're looking at which vulnerabilities are the most dangerous and most difficult and most destructive that need to be remedied fast or remediated fast, and then the others that can kind of be put to one side for the moment, right? We talked about this in terms of probabilistic security, statistical and behavioral models, and so on, right?
Rory, I think this is really interesting, the continuous ongoing red teaming that Sweet Security claims that they can do. I think that's really interesting because as you've been saying, probabilism is on the rise and will be on the rise. I don't think it'll get rid of deterministic tools completely, ever. But I do think there will be a different ratio. If we've been 10% probabilistic, in the future we'll be 60, 70% probabilistic or more. So I think that's really interesting. The thing I wanted to mention about Mythos as well, there were a couple of things that were interesting I was talking to my son about. One of the things is that Mythos is going in to find open source vulnerabilities. So they're identifying and exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities in real open source code bases.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, the Uber Lord. We're being watched by the Mythos overlord to go in and protect us and take care of, these open source code bases, including major operating systems and browsers and important software. And while I appreciate it, I also think it's a little bit of overstep, right? Project Glasswing says they're securing critical software for the AI era, right? This is on the main Anthropic page, and it anyway. What were you going to say? I mean, yes, thank you, but we didn't ask you to go look at this for us.
Well, one of the perspectives that I've heard is that, well, if you've got 20, 30-year-old open source code that is, edited and changed and it's community driven, whatever, of course if you point a powerful tool at it, of course you're going to find vulnerabilities. Just for the fact that it's a more powerful tool. Or, well, why would you do that anyway? It's kind of like looking for the easiest way to create headlines through talking about the most vulnerabilities found that had never been found before. The fact that it's done that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a leapfrog in terms of intelligence or capabilities. It's the fact that they've decided to do that. I'm sure if the other models found some old code somewhere or an old repository or something and pointed them at that and kind of just attacked it with everything, you would find vulnerabilities as well. Now, I'm not denigrating it, but it's not as if people tried to find those vulnerabilities before and couldn't. It's just the fact that the folk behind Mythos, and presumably the marketing department as well, thought of a good story and thought of a good plan and then acted on it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is a form of intelligence here that we haven't seen before. I talked to a lot of folks when I was at IBM Think, and there seems to be a belief amongst many of the folks I chatted with that there is an ability to synthesize data in an unprompted fashion. In other words, synthesize something giving you insight into whatever the subject or code is without having been prompted to look for it. It doesn't mean that it's AGI and it's not, it's not the singularity, folks, but it is a form of intelligence that we haven't seen before. And yeah, there's a lot of great marketing. So what I'm referencing here and what I was discussing with my son is Project Glasswing, and it's on Anthropic's main page, and we'll put the link in the notes. And it's the new initiative bringing together all of the overlords, AWS, Anthropic, Apple, Broadcom, Cisco, all of the Project Glasswing folks in an effort to secure the world's most critical software. So great marketing hype, I agree with you. And something that my son's generation, he's a millennial, are a little bit concerned about because they're going in and doing things that were not asked of them in open source code, number one. The other thing is that folks are responding to Mythos with new Mythos capabilities in open source. So one is called Mythos Agent, another is called Mythos Research, outside in replication of Mythos. Mythos Bench, Mythos Launch Response. So there's all of these open source projects that are coming online to kind of answer the Mythos question, So anyway, indeed. I guess that's enough of that. But I know we were talking about Sweet Security, and I'm sorry I sort of derailed the conversation to go off on my tangent.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's what it's about, chatting and let's see where the conversation goes. So thanks for that, Christina.
You bet.
This week's guest is Shiv Agarwal, who is the co-founder and CEO at Singulr AI. Hi, Shiv. Great to talk with you again, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you both, and it's great to be here on your show.
Thank you. Well,
we're super happy to have you on board, and we had a lovely briefing with Shiv back in April, his company Singulr AI, and it was great to hear about what Singulr AI is doing. Yeah, we said, hey, come on the show. And so that the first question we always ask, Shiv, is, what's keeping you up at night these days? So,
the business we are in, we are seeing the enterprise AI landscape evolve so quickly, so rapidly. And a lot of enterprise leaders that we work with are very concerned about keeping pace with the AI adoption while managing the business risks. It just seems like AI is getting out of control for them. And we are seen as a trustworthy partner to them in their journey. And so what keeps me up at night is that how do we ourselves keep pace with all the advancements happening in the world of AI, so that we can help our partners, our customers, take control of their AI.
I mean, it must be strange because people would automatically assume that because you're producing new, innovative, cutting-edge technology in the area of AI, that of course you would know about everything that's coming out. Do people, I guess, assume that that's the case?
Absolutely. And our promise to our customers is that we will help them stay in control of their AI, stay ahead of the innovation which is happening. And in order to deliver to that, we ourselves, our platform needs to be fully aware of what's happening in the AI world out there, the new kinds of form factors which are coming, the risks which comes with it, so that we can in turn help them out. And that's the trust with which they are partnering with us, and we need to come good at their trust.
Yeah, we just talked about a news story on the show about Google's GTIG finding the first zero-day exploit created with AI. We've all been expecting this, right? It's not a surprise. It's kind of like, oh, here we go. The first one is now named and being talked about and being investigated. Of course, they don't share how the attack was built. They don't share even who the attacker, which well-known criminal was involved. They don't even share that. But there are a couple of things here. One is you have to stay ahead of the development of AI, but you also have to stay on top of the attacks and the concerns in AI. So how does one do that in your industry? How do you keep yourself up to date? Is it reading? Is it really intelligent engineers? Is it your customers educating you? How do you do that, Shiv?
A great question. And one of the things that we have realized in the past 2 years is that security is a reactive game. It's a
Yeah.
chasing game, and you can never win if you approach the AI landscape from that aspect or from that angle. So from very beginning, we have taken a very different approach to helping enterprise, take control of their AI. What we propose and what we have been working with the enterprises is that how can you put proactive controls in place so that you minimize security incidences, because it's too late if you have to deal with security incidences, specifically the rate at which new vulnerabilities will now be found. You've all heard about, like, all these different models being used and working at insane speed. So it'll always be hard for the enterprises to keep up if you approach from a security angle and trying to patch all these issues and vulnerabilities. You have to do those, but if you can reduce the attack surface from the very beginning, if you can ensure that certain best practices are put in place and certain controls are put in place, that is a better route. Now, we saw this when I did my previous startup, Arkin. We saw this in the world of application security, east-west security, where we came up with a microsegmentation solution where when a attacker gets into the enterprise, and we have to assume they will get into through the perimeter, there is a strong probability that they have still not reached your crown jewel. So how do you prevent them from doing lateral movements and reaching your crown jewels is by putting granular east-west or between the application layer firewalls or controls so that they cannot move laterally. And that really, the microsegmentation approach really helped the customers, because ultimately, again, you have to assume that bad things will come into the network. How do you keep away from going deep into your environment? So similarly, in the world of AI, we are working with the customers to have identified almost 700 different controls that needs to be put in place so that these incidences can be avoided, and we help put those controls in place upfront in a more proactive way. And it all starts with understanding the intent and then transferring it to the runtime controls, basically.
So, Shiv, that's interesting. What about, there's been quite a lot of talk about hard boundaries when it comes to this kind of stuff, right? Where at an architectural level, for critical infrastructure. We need to be a bit tougher if we are going to look at how do we protect, how do we govern things like, complete separation of services or API definitions at that level. So making things much more difficult to bypass for the attackers. Do you think that's part of the future of governance, or the kind of one of the end goals? Have these hard boundaries, or does that just make it much more difficult for enterprises to kind of manage their security operations?
That's a great question. We always need to have a balance between putting these controls and having the business operate at the speed of AI, because the biggest advantage and a competitive advantage that the business can get is by using AI in a smart way in their business, and whether across their business, right? Whether it's product development, whether it's operations, sales, marketing, customer support. So you need to balance it out. Too much of controls and too much of hard restrictions can sometimes come in the way of making solid business progress. But what we have seen is that there are certain level of access controls, certain level of runtime behavior expectations, that if you could model them out, and if you could ensure that at the runtime AI is operating as intended, then you can definitely strike that balance. There has been examples, if you look at the different form factors of AI. So as employees started using more third-party models and external chatbots, it was very clear that enterprises needs to quickly lean into helping them out with their needs by putting proper contracts in place, by giving them paid versions of these tools, which comes with proper data protection and privacy and security controls. If you are using private accounts or free accounts, then there is no such guarantee in place. And that was some basic good hygiene to be put, which is, how do you identify the use cases that employees need AI for, identify the right tool set for it, and or the AI platform, and then go behind it by putting the right controls and the right contracts in place, right?
I mean, do you advocate for, because I know when it comes to things like policy, runtime, and so on, do you think more companies should have, kill switches? Again, it's the sort of ultimate deterrent, right? It's the kind of completely shut down. I know we've seen evidence of that coming in. We've seen calls for that to be part of a security operations, but it's the security harness, if you like. So it just shuts down autonomous entities, whoever they are, if they go off the path on which they're on.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? We talked about the employee example, but agentic ecosystem makes it even harder and more complex, right? So yes, the kill switch notion has always been there, and definitely it needs to be there. The question is always to identify, right, what is the right behavior, what is an anomalous behavior, which becomes harder and harder. So, some forms of control in the agentic ecosystem, proactive controls, are things like, recently what happened at Meta and what happened at Pocket OS, where, agent starts going out of bounds, starts becoming rogue. So are there a certain set of destructive actions, for example, that you do not want agents to take? And instead of the whole agent level kill switch, is there a command level kill switch? Is there a function level kill switch that can be invoked when such an action is being taken, right? Now, we have seen that if you can, again, going back to all these agentic AI platforms are giving hooks to put some proactive controls in place. And if you can hook into these systems, put those controls in place, then the chances of having the need to trigger a kill switch goes down significantly.
Okay.
Some of what we're talking about is very deterministic, right? How you structure the architecture, having a kill switch, which is a function of, you make a deterministic decision and you flip the switch, or however you do it. But we've been talking a lot as well, Shiv, about probabilism. And you mentioned, we have to be able to operate at the speed of the machine, at the speed of AI. And so it's just a philosophical conversation that we keep having about deterministic security versus probabilistic security. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, great question. And that's what makes it even harder as you start looking into, bringing in more autonomous actions with agents into your environment. There is, when we talk about, policies and controls, if you look at what has been happening traditionally in the governance world, it has been very, very static. And statically you validate whether your controls are aligned with, let's say, a regulatory guideline or your internal best practices. It does not take into account, or never took into account, a runtime behavior which can change, because the whole idea of building an agentic ecosystem is to learn over time and to improve and get better and to do more smarter things. So how do you differentiate between a scenario where agents are getting smarter and working for you versus getting smarter and working against you? Right? We are going to see a lot of advancements in detective and preventive technologies as well over the next few years, which of course internally that itself will use a lot of AI in order to model out good versus bad. It is not a straightforward, rule-based kind of analysis. It really needs to understand the behavior of those applications. It needs to understand the intent behind, whether it's an employee invoking it or an agent invoking another agent. So we are truly going to see, in this world of security, we have talked a lot about behavior analysis, behavior analytics, user behavior, and machine behavior. I don't think we have seen a lot of compelling solutions here. But now, something which should have existed before now needs to exist because of AI, right? So we are going to see more and more systems, and this is one of the area, for example, we also internally invest in to understand how do we make these controls more dynamic.
So this is about contextual evaluation, right? So this is
That's right.
at minute by minute. I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, haven't we, Christina,
Yeah,
with a few other guests.
Yes.
Machine speed requires minute by minute context changes or changes of state. So you need to move towards something that assesses risk through the context. So, and evaluating that in, real time. Yeah, I guess so. This is, that's something that's come up, but I know that this is what you're alluding to, Shiv, right?
Yeah. It has to be real time. It has to be at the point of when the action is being taken, what we call runtime. There is a configuration aspect of these things, and initial set of permissions and access level that these things have. For example, when you are putting agents out there, does it have the maker's permission, or is it set to have the maker's permission and execute using maker's permission, or as it passes, actions and controls down the stream, are those permissions passed and inherited, or the right kind of,
Yeah, there's also a disconnect between how people are looking, how companies are looking at AI, whether it's got its own identity or whether it's tied to the human identity. Are you always going back to the human in the loop to make sure that there is the permission? And can that be possible to always have the permission of the human in the loop? Because as we've said, agent to agent creation is running at machine speed in runtime. And to stop to get human permission is kind of counter to that benefit of the machine to machine speed. So it's a fascinating topic. And I really enjoyed some of your insights on this, Shiv. And I'm glad that you could join us on the show, because this is something we talk about almost every week. And it's changed so much since we first started looking at AI several years ago, and now looking at agents for about a year. And so please come back and join us again on the show. It's really great to get your thoughts on it, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you for the conversation and having me on the show, and I thoroughly enjoyed as well. And as this ecosystem evolve, I'm look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you.
Shiv. Yeah, thanks, Shiv. Bye-bye. Yeah, love the conversation with Shiv. Christina, that was really interesting to get his take. AI governance is so hot right now. There are lots to talk about. as a theme for further discussion or a special episode, even.
Definitely. Special episode.
That would
I
be
like
good.
that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, from all of the startups we've talked with, so many of them are attacking this problem in different ways. And I've been thinking about a matrix or a blog or something to kind of delineate who's doing what in which way. And it's kind of like the beginning of any new tech, the first PC manufacturers. There were different forms and factors. Same thing with AI governance. And it's going to be really interesting to see what runs the long distance and what we end up with at the end. So maybe a special report, my friend.
Okay. Well, we should probably wrap up the show now, Christina.
We should do.
Just wanted to talk about next week. And next week, our guest is Cody Pierce, who's the co-founder and CEO of Neon Cyber. So we shall be talking all about AI security in the browser and various other things.
And there we go. See, another perspective, another form factor.
It will also be, Christina, our 70th episode.
Oh my gosh. How did we get so old so fast?
I don't know. Time flies, especially when you're
fun.
Oh, I was going to say time flies when you're a greybeard.
When you're a gray hair or a gray beard.
Or a gray beard. That's right. Definitely. So we look forward to that. It'd be great if folks could join us for that one. I appreciate all the feedback that you've given us so far.
Yes, indeed.
And if you want to reach out to us, you can do so via email. You can reach me, which is rory@richmondadvisorygroup.com.
Yeah, and you can find me at christina@richmondadvisorygroup.com. And please do. Folks, we love to hear from you. So please do reach out. Let us know anything that you're thinking about. We do get some spam from providing our emails, and please don't. Please don't reach out if you want to revamp our website or if you want to take over the management of our podcast, because we're doing fine. We love what we do and we're doing fine. So please do reach out if you're a real person, not a bot, and you have some feedback, constructive or other. Okay?
I echo that. Thank you. Right. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye. Join us again next week.